Welcome to the Kubus podcast. In each episode, we will be meeting the individuals who can give us real insight into the problems, solutions, and people in our technology industry.
Welcome to the latest edition of the Kubus podcast series. My name is Sophie Mitchell. I'm the Cisco Vendor Manager here at Kubus, and today we are going to be discussing all things hybrid work. Hybrid work is very much top of mind for a lot of business leaders and organisations today. So we're going to delve a little bit deeper into that, look at some of the challenges that are associated, and start to discuss the Cisco strategy around it. So I'm very excited to have special guest Matt Slough from Cisco Meraki join us today. Morning, Matt.
Morning.
How are you?
Yeah, very good, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining. Very coincidentally, you literally live a stone's throw away from us, so hopefully you managed to have a bit of a lay-in this morning.
No, definitely not. I've got a 9-month-old son, so there's no lay-ins whether I need to be 3 miles away from home or not.
I know that one.
Yeah.
So Matt, it'd be great if you could just give us a bit of your background at Cisco Meraki, tell us what your current role entails and how you happen to be sat here with me today.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been at Cisco and Cisco Meraki. I'll kind of dig into that in a bit more detail, but I've been at Cisco for 8 years now. I've worked the whole time at Cisco Meraki, and I've been a number of roles in channel and sales at Cisco Meraki. And in the last couple of years, I've worked more in a role focusing on how do we find growth at Cisco, but how do we utilise Meraki as the launch pad for success? And that's success for Cisco internally, for partners like Kubus, and also for our customers. So I'm now focused on that, and a major part of that and the cross-architectural piece from Cisco is around hybrid work, which is why I'm here today, talking about hybrid work.
Brilliant. So it'd be really good, Matt, if you could kind of set the scene for us. Hybrid work, obviously a huge topic at the moment. What's it all about? What are some of the current challenges and trends that we're seeing? And why is that kind of resonating with our customers?
Yeah, hybrid work is an enormous topic. I think if we start with what I suppose the definition of hybrid work is, and then how that's almost changed over the last couple of years, and I think we can all expect just a little bit of chat about COVID because that's had a big impact on it. But hybrid work is effectively how can they execute on their role, their business objectives from wherever they choose to. And that really is putting the choice of where they do that in the hands of the employee rather than the employer. And again, we can touch on that in a little bit more detail. And so you start to look at, well, what is it that from a technology perspective, how can we help to enable and empower those users to be effective in their role? But then also, how can we go over and above that? So there's a number of areas that we'll need to look at with hybrid work when it comes to how can users and employees be effective, because you can't just hand a laptop to a user and say, there you go, there's a laptop, you've got VPN, off you go. Mm-hmm. Because there's a whole raft of things that we need to take into consideration, not least security. I'm
guessing though, when COVID kind of struck, that probably did happen to a lot of companies that perhaps weren't.
Yeah. I've speaking very personally, I've worked remotely now for over 10 years. So when COVID hit, for me, there wasn't an enormous change. For a lot of people, when you're used to coming into an office 5 days a week, commuting to and from, to suddenly have to work remotely, where you're not used to what that dynamic is, how to collaborate with your peers and other colleagues, it was an enormous change. Mm. But where it was an enormous change as well for businesses is I suddenly now need to enable my users to be able to work from home as seamlessly as if they're in the office. Mm-hmm. And that's really thrown up some nuances for how businesses conduct themselves, but then also what is it that employees are looking for from a business. So when we handed laptops to employees and said, off you go, you're going to have to work from home now, there were people whose job role is office-based, or it is call centre-based, mm-hmm. or they're in a retail store and things like that. How can they start to work from home as seamlessly as when they're in the office? And that was a real big challenge for a lot of businesses. Cisco, obviously, as a company that sells all of these technologies to businesses, was best placed to help. But yeah, it was a real step change of, okay, what is it that we need to do as a business to help our employees work from home seamlessly? Now, the thing that's really key to point out here is that hybrid work is unique to every business as a business is unique in itself. There is no right sizing or one size fits all for hybrid work. You can't say to a customer, oh, you need hybrid work? Here's a box full of hybrid work. Just go and implement that.
Be nice, wouldn't it?
Wouldn't it just? Yeah.
Although we wouldn't have jobs.
Yeah, very true. So it's not a one size fits all. It truly is up to the customer and the business and what the strategic direction of that business is as to how they want to implement hybrid work. And what is important to them when it comes to that. And also within that business and that strategic direction, you have to look at how unique teams are within that as well. HR is not going to have the same hybrid work needs as sales and marketing and IT, who need to be in the office to make sure that everything's running and things like that. So there are a number of considerations when you look at it from that perspective as to how a business adopts hybrid work. And then from that, you can dig into, well, what actually is hybrid work to us? And that's when you start to look into the world of, when we talk about COVID and the change that had overnight to every industry, you start to then look at, okay, well, what is it that we need from a hybrid work strategy? And then post-COVID, what are we expecting of teams that we told to work remotely? Are they now coming back to the office? And that's become a real dichotomy for a lot of business leaders in trying to work out what the structure of their business looks like moving forward.
Finding this balance as well, right, between keeping your employees happy and productive, but ultimately still ensuring that you're meeting your needs as a business. Yeah,
absolutely. There's a real kind of buzzword in the industry at the moment around workforce volatility, and that comes in a challenge between what we're hearing a lot about, the Great Resignation, people being able to now fluidly move their labour between companies because they can work anywhere. They don't need to work from an office. They can work from a plank of wood in a back bedroom in their house and do the same job for another company, versus, okay, I have great talent that works for my organisation. How do I retain that talent? How do I make sure that talent is serviced and they enjoy working for this company so that they don't become part of that Great Resignation? But then also, when there is such volatility in the market, how do I ensure that I have that best of breed talent? How do I ensure that the people that I'm keeping aren't people that are holding my business back? They're innovating, they're able to move the business in the strategic directions that I want to move it in as a business leader. And so the only way that you can achieve that is with a true hybrid work focus, but then also for those that want to come back to an office, you can then start to work out, okay, what am I doing with my space that I'm inviting employees into? Is it a smart space? Am I utilising the space in a collaborative way? Can people come into the office, meet with their colleagues and have that kind of discussion of innovation that is going to help to move my business forward? Or are they coming into the office and sitting behind a plank of wood as they would be at home, and they can do that at home and we can save cost? So there's a real decision that needs to be made within the industry, but also when you look at employees and that workforce volatility, the way that we all consume our work-life balance now has changed. So I mentioned that I've got a 9-month-old baby and I work from home, and that enables me to be able to have the flexibility of my working day and be able to, if I want to take him out for lunch, I can take him out for lunch, but I will still do my work in and around the freedom that my business provides me because I'm working from home. Now, where that's great is that I feel that flexibility, but where there's concern or worry within businesses is, am I getting the productivity from that user that I would expect to get from that user? Or are they working effectively that 9-hour day? And what we're starting to see, rather than companies not get that productivity from a user, we're starting to see that the user actually can't manage their own time potentially. They're looking at, they're working longer hours, burnout. And that's a real challenge for that talent retention is, am I expecting more of my users because they're working from home, working remotely, and am I burning them out because I'm putting too much emphasis on getting productivity out of them? So I think for the first time in the history of IT, we're seeing that convergence and the Venn diagram of user experience versus productivity. How can we get the most out of the user, but at the same time, how can the user share our views as a company and therefore want to work for us? And when we're looking at that, that can be things such as sustainability. I don't want to drive to an office and spend 3 hours in a car driving there, 3 hours driving back, when that has a carbon footprint, and I'm more conscious of my sustainable credentials now. So how does my company replicate that with me? But then also, we saw during COVID, people moved away from cities. I mean, we're in the Cotswolds. House prices went up astronomically in the Cotswolds because people wanted to move out of London. So people moved out of the cities, got dogs, things like that. They changed that work-life balance, and they don't want to go back to working in offices if they don't have to. But it's not just as easy, as I said, of giving a user a laptop and saying, there's VPN, just connect back in to the network and just do your work, get on with it. Because there's other considerations. There's networking considerations, which we can dig into at an architectural level. And then there's just considerations around how people collaborate now, and how do we enable our employees not to feel excluded because they're working from home? How can they collaborate more easily, have those water cooler moments where they can meet with people that they would ordinarily meet with in the office and feel close to the organization? And then, from a technology perspective, we're starting to now drive into the world of SASE and zero trust. And so we're starting to adopt technologies that enable this hybrid work. But the real challenge for a lot of organizations is, how do we not just duplicate networks where we have a network in the office and that works great because everyone was in the office and they're able to use the Wi-Fi and they're able to send stuff to a printer on floor 7. But then when they go home, they need a duplicated network because they're working from home. They need the same levels of security. So it's around as well, how do organizations ensure that the cost of doing business doesn't go up astronomically?
I imagine it's the complexity as well for these IT teams. I mean, all these remote users being added to the network, all connected to more and more devices.
Yeah, absolutely.
More cloud applications. All of this creates not only the security risk, but a big headache in terms of complexity. Yeah,
that was a big thing that happened obviously overnight with COVID. Was suddenly there was an enormous proliferation of devices connecting to networks. Now, before COVID, that was a real challenge for IT teams to have to negotiate and have to understand, okay, what devices are accessing my network, what resources are they accessing, and do I want them to be there? Suddenly, you're sending people home and saying, just connect however you can to the network so you can do your job, because yesterday you were in the office, today you're not. And where that has now adapted and changed over the last couple of years post-COVID, it really, for some companies, hasn't. We're still looking at companies that are turning around and saying, yeah, I sent people home with a laptop. I don't want to know what other devices are connecting to our networks, because that might be a real headache for me.
Scary though, right?
Yeah, really scary. But the security element is the biggest challenge for these organizations. When we look at SASE as an example, the idea of having users working remotely and trying to maintain that secure perimeter that they had when they're in the kind of walls of my network is so difficult for them to manage. And that's where that complexity and then cost comes in. But Cisco has a number of products to help with that. But SASE's a big challenge. People adopting a zero trust strategy is an enormous transition and step forward for them in their businesses, and it takes real investment to be able to do that, but the payoff afterwards for those companies and the structure and the way they do business is absolutely enormous.
I'm glad that you brought SASE and Zero Trust up, actually, because it's something that I was going to kind of touch on. So we hear these kind of terms being flouted about, but what does it mean in real terms, and how does sort of SASE and Zero Trust, what does it mean, and how does it fit into the overall kind of hybrid work strategy? Yeah,
so I think it's fair to say that hybrid work really... So SASE was a term that had been around for a couple of years before COVID, and hybrid work and COVID really drove the adoption of SASE. Now, SASE at its core is Secure Access Service Edge, which is 4 words that for anyone else might mean absolutely nothing.
Marketing buzzword, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, fantastic marketing buzzwords. And when you break it down to what it really means is the ability or the dispersal of your traditional perimeter security out into the wider world. How do I secure, as I mentioned, how do I secure people, whether they're working at home, working from a coffee shop, me visiting here, working from here? How do I enable them to be able to do their job but ensure that my IP, my data, everything that's important to my business is as secure as it possibly can be. Now, zero trust as an architecture forms a part of SASE. So it's an interesting piece where you can take zero trust out of SASE, or you can kind of and have it as a standalone, or it's a part of SASE. So I'll dig into that in a bit more detail. But SASE is interesting when you look at how a number of vendors achieve a SASE architecture and a SASE state for a network, because what organizations need to be very careful of is that where you can remove the burden of on-premises hardware like firewalls and that security posture at the perimeter of your network and move it into the cloud, organizations need to be very mindful that they're not just moving what was on-prem and putting it in the cloud in exactly the same structure of architecture.
More layers, isn't that right?
Yeah, exactly. So the thing that we joke about internally is that when a customer does that, it is just the same architecture somewhere else. That's what SASE stands for. They've just moved their firewalls to the cloud. Now, for some customers, that may be absolutely the objective. They just want the workload off of their own plate because they don't want the firewalls in their own network. When you implement a true SASE methodology, you're really looking at how can I make the most of people working remotely, people working hybrid, having exactly the same experience of working in an office when they're working from home, and how can I make that seamless for them? And again, coming back to that workforce volatility piece, I don't want my users to feel like they constantly have to log into stuff. They constantly have to do two-factor authentication on their phone.
Painful.
It's really painful. So we want to make it as seamless for the user as possible, whilst at the same time maintaining the integrity of our network security. So devising your network architecture based on SASE in its pure form of enabling people to access cloud and SaaS applications anywhere securely, but at the same time having that experience in the office so that they don't have to have a different and contradictory experience based on whether they're in a Starbucks or whether they're in the office is the key goal for SASE. Zero trust is something slightly different to SASE or more than SASE. Zero trust is by its very definition, it is not trusting devices, users, and workloads, applications.
It's just an approach, isn't it? It's not a product as such.
Exactly. That's the key thing to point out with zero trust is it's not something you can buy. You can't buy zero trust. Again, back into that. Can you give me a box of zero trust? I can't give you a box of zero trust. It's an architecture. It's a methodology. It's a way that a network should be designed. And it is important to point out that the unicorns of tomorrow, the Facebooks, the Amazons, people like that, have already been created today. They exist. They are here today. We just obviously don't know yet until they have grown in the same ways that Amazon and Facebook and etc. did.
Wish we knew. I'd be putting some shares on.
Yeah, absolutely. There's an investment opportunity there. But they are here now, and their networks are built on a zero trust architecture. Their networks are built on the trust no one, trust nothing, trust no device, and treat everything as if it's a malicious actor until it's authenticated onto your network or to the resource that you need it to. But then also leverage the lowest possible privileges for that user or that device as possible. People shouldn't have access laterally across your network to every resource that you have. They should only be able to do what is needed for their job. Because if there are malicious actors trying to access your business, they will take data and they will try and spread and try and capture as much data as possible. If they are able to attack someone and they are able to get into your network, they will only be able to see what that one user has been able to access. So being able to segment your network with zero trust and again authenticate into every part of the network is the key to a zero trust architecture. So zero trust forms a part of SASE because you need to be able to authenticate users remotely when they're working remotely, when working from an office. But zero trust isn't the be all and end all of SASE. It is just a part of it. But in the future, organizations should be looking to transition to a zero trust network. Now, there's nuances and challenges within that. As we onboard more and more IoT devices, that becomes slightly difficult. But when you're architecting your network from the ground up with that in mind, that's more easy to countenance for. When you're transitioning an existing network, that's a lot more difficult and takes consultation with vendors, with partners like Kubus and people. So just be mindful of that when you're looking to embark on it.
And just in terms of SASE, I know you kind of mentioned it, but it's a bit of a buzzword, and there's a lot of vendors out there that claim to offer a true SASE experience. Or how sort of mature are Cisco on their SASE journey, and is it truly a converged network and security offering? Where kind of are you, and where's that going?
Now, this is a great opportunity for me to launch into a big old sales pitch on Cisco, but I'm actually not going to. And the reason for that is I think the biggest product that Cisco could sell when it comes to SASE and zero trust is freedom of choice. That's the point of SASE. And like I've just mentioned, having a consultative approach to SASE and to zero trust is the real key. Now, Cisco does have a full suite of products to help with SASE and zero trust. Cisco Umbrella from security, or the whole Cisco security suite, Umbrella, advanced malware protection, IPS, IDS, and the Talos security piece. Also looking at Duo from a connectivity, a cloud access security broker perspective, as well as Cisco Meraki, as I work for, and also the Catalyst networking line. So there's a whole suite of products that will help you achieve SASE or a zero trust architecture. But the biggest key point is to speak with a partner like Kubus, and who will engage Cisco and speak to us and have that consultative approach. Because organizations won't one day be not on a SASE journey and the next day have completed SASE. That's not how it works. It is a rolling road of how do we get to the end game. Now, there's a lot of things that we can do as Cisco to help. There's commercial vehicles that we can help with, things like enterprise agreements, so you can adopt Cisco technology over a period of time. But it really does take having a deep conversation with us and Kubus to understand how we can help you on that SASE or zero trust journey.
So Matt, talk us through the pen building in Cisco. So I guess actually for the benefit of our audience, Cisco have recently opened their first smart office. If you get a chance after this podcast, I'd really recommend you just pop onto YouTube, put in pen building Cisco, and there's a couple of 2-minute videos that just give you a really nice insight into what Cisco are doing. Talk us through that, Matt, what Cisco are doing, how it fits into your overall sustainability goals, and I guess, is this the future of hybrid work? Yeah,
I think hybrid work is the ability, as we've mentioned, for people to work wherever they choose. But then a real drive for a lot of organizations is, okay, if I'm inviting people back into offices, like I've mentioned, how do I make it more of a collaborative space? How do I make people want to be there? Now, there are a number of organizations that are, should we say, incentivizing people to come back, putting on, lunches and parties and things like that to get people back in the office. Then there are others who are just mandating it. You now need to be back in the office. And that's where there's going to be a real challenge for hybrid work moving forward, where business leaders that mandate people being in the office are going to really see that fluid workforce, the labour movement, where people go, I don't want to be in an office. Why would I now come back to doing that? I've got a dog as well that I now need to feed in the middle of the day and walk, so I don't want to work for you. So it's going to be a real challenge for a lot of people. We're seeing that people are starting to, where they're incentivizing people to come back to the office, it's now costing them more money than it did pre-COVID, because they're suddenly like, I've got to make people want to be here and working in an office, which is a real challenge. So the way that Cisco are approaching it with our kind of smart spaces strategy has born Pen 1, which is a building in Midtown Manhattan. I think it's about 56,000 square feet, so not a small building. But it was built from, it's an old 1970s building, but the refit recently was from the ground up with the smart office in mind. How can we make this space more of a collaborative, ergonomic space for our employees to work from? And therefore, that will then breed more want by people to come to the office because we're addressing their well-being, security, and I mean physical security in that instance, but yeah, their health and well-being being the real core focus, and then how do they execute on their job most effectively when they're in that office with the collaboration tools that are available to them. So Pen 1 is a building that brings together Cisco's networking technology in Meraki and Catalyst. It brings together IoT technology with things like smart cameras and sensors as well. So Cisco Meraki and Catalyst environmental sensors to understand the air quality, humidity, temperature, lighting, everything involved in that. All the way through to the collaboration tools, WebEx boards and things like that in the environment so that people can collaborate with colleagues that aren't in the office as much as they can with colleagues that are in the office. But then even driving towards things like the desks being able to raise and become standing desks, them have power built in over PoE. So when I bring my laptop and I put it on the desk, I can plug my USB charged laptop into a port on the desk and it charges using PoE.
Something really cool I saw actually, there's QR codes right on all the desks that you scan.
Absolutely,
and then it personalises to you.
Yeah, exactly.
So you'll get, well, your phone will be connected, I guess, with your screensaver, and then exactly, you log out for the day and it just resets.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're starting to really see that kind of digital workplace revolution as well, where you start to understand remotely, I think I'm going to go into the office today. Let me see who else is going to be in the office. Let me see if it's going to be busy or,
don't like Matt,
or empty. Exactly, yeah, exactly. When I go in the office, no one's ever there. It's weird. But yeah, people wanting to go in the office and understanding what's going on in the office on that day, being able to book themselves desks, meeting rooms remotely and things like that. So utilising Cisco's technology around Cisco Spaces to understand where people are in the building, not only provides intelligence to users, but it provides us as the building manager intelligence as well. And that's the point of a smart space, is how do I capture data that's going to enable me to make decisions about that space? So from a data perspective for us as employers, it can even reach into things like health and safety. If there's a fire in the building or there's an alarm goes off in the building, how do I know where there are people in the building? So I can let the fire department know when they turn up, hey, there's people on floors 5, 7 and 10, but there's no one on floors 1, 2 and 3 as an example. So they can start to augment the information that we derive from the building to provide in a health and safety way. But then also, how can I start to reduce the carbon footprint and the energy used by that building? If people aren't on floors 5, 7 and 10, then how do I make sure that lights turn off, blinds close, so that we don't have to have the heating or cooling on in the summer and winter and things like that, so that we can keep constant temperatures, keep the energy usage down? How can we use solar panels on the roof and make sure that we're getting best use of that power within the building, and be smart about how that power is moved around and distributed around the building, so it's not sent to places that within the building where it's going to use the power when we don't need it to, and other places where we're going to have to draw from the grid rather than from solar panels or wind and renewables to be able to do that. So Pen 1 pulls all of that strategy together, all of the traditional Cisco technologies of networking and security and things like that, with now new technology around smart spaces and understanding about the usage of our environment to make smarter decisions about it.
Sustainability, obviously hugely important to Cisco.
Massive.
I think, 90% of your energy now is from renewable sources, which great to see you guys leading by example. Yeah,
we have a net zero goal of 2040. We have a Scope 1 and Scope 2 sustainability goal of 2025, so that's very immediate. But I'm sure you can appreciate for a large global IT hardware manufacturer, moving to net zero carbon is not
a small task.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's not just us and our approach to offsetting carbon and greenhouse gases. It's how do we enable our entire supply chain? How do we enable our customers to also be on that journey with us in sustainability as well? Pen 1 is an example of how we can show customers that they can start to do that. And it's not it's not to think that every customer has a 56,000 square foot office that they need to create as a smart space. I've seen your office here, absolutely beautiful, and you have used the space in that collaborative way. You don't have banks of desks, you have meeting areas that people can come and see each other and spend time with each other, and that enriches the user experience, makes people want to work for you, but at the same time there will be benefits for you with a building that's laid out in that way that will help with your sustainability message and cost exactly. And Cisco is exactly the same. Penmon is just a showcase of how we can achieve that. We're now rolling that out globally into all of our offices, so we will retrofit all of our offices moving forward with that same methodology and the same way of thinking, and that will help us to achieve that net zero goal by 2040.
Thank you so much for coming in today. Really appreciate it. And I hope our audience have found that as insightful as I have. Giving them a little bit of food for thought and start thinking about their own hybrid work strategy. So thank you to all our listeners today, and we look forward to welcoming you back again soon for the next edition of our podcast series. Thank you and have a great day.
Thank you for joining us at the Kubus podcast. We hope you enjoyed the chat. Remember, there are more conversations in the series. Just search for Kubus wherever you get your podcasts and subscribe.